the multipolar neuron, where there's a soma or a cell body, and then there's dendrites coming off that. You can think of them as tree branches or tree roots, whichever one you want to think about, right? But there's a bunch of dendrites coming off of the soma, which is a cell body, right? And again, we're just kind of going over this, and then we'll see the model. And what do we have inside the soma? Well, inside the soma, we've got the nucleus with the nucleolus, right? And then, of course, we have all these different parts within the cell body, as any other cell. So we're going to talk about the Nissl bodies, which are a little bit different. You probably saw that on your lecture test. Nissl bodies are part of the neuron. They are rough endoplasmic reticulum. They make proteins. All right, with that being said, you have the axon, which is this blue line down the middle of this kind of sausage-looking thing. The axon is going to be coming off of the soma or the cell body, which you see here. And then we've got the myelin sheath. The myelin sheath are these kind of sausage-like wraparound parts of the axon, and it speeds up the conduction of the action potential. What we have in myelin sheath is an area where there's a space, right? So between the myelin sheath, these little sausage myelin sheaths, there's a space, and that space is called the node of Ranvier. So we're going to see that in just a little bit. So again, just kind of giving you this information from an illustration because it's easier to kind of go from there. And we went over this in lecture as well, so it is a review. The axon hillock is just the area of the soma right before the beginning of the axon. Okay, so that's it. And then, of course, the terminal end bulbs, or here the axon terminal, right? Go with the verbiage in the lab manual. In the lab manual, they call it, well, it's both. They have axon terminal and synaptic end bulbs because they're both legitimate. That is going to be on this end of the axon, right? We've got the soma end or the cell body end of the neuron. Then we've got the axon terminal end. These are not dendrites. These are dendrites up here by the soma. Okay, awesome. So that's kind of your basic, this is my neuron, okay? And again, this is just kind of what we see here. We've got the nucleus with the nucleolus in the middle of the soma. We've got the Nissl bodies. We still have all the other organelles like the Golgi apparatus, etc. But we don't ask for that, so don't worry about it. Okay, awesome. Just as a reminder, the myelin sheath is going to be the sausage-like wraparound on the axon. If the axon is in the central nervous system, we call that the oligodendrocyte. That's what the myelin sheath is called, right? Because it's made from the neuroglial cell called oligodendrocyte. So that's going to be important. And we talk about the axons being part of the white matter because the myelin sheath, both myelin sheaths in the central nervous system, the oligodendrocytes, and the peripheral nervous system, the Schwann cells, they both are made of phospholipids. So theoretically, they don't really stain that dark of a color, and that's why we call them the white matter. So white matter are axons, okay? And in the peripheral nervous system, as I just mentioned, the myelin sheath is made of the cell called the Schwann cell. Okay, this is going to matter because, as you can see in the list, we've got a Schwann cell, or what's called a neurolemmacyte, which I don't use that word. I always call it a Schwann cell. And because it's in parentheses, you can use either. So we have something called a neurolemma, a Schwann cell, and the myelin sheath. We're going to differentiate those in just a little bit. But again, neurolemma is going to be associated with the associated with the Schwann cell. The Schwann cell is the myelin sheath, and this is all found in the peripheral nervous system. So again, just what we saw in lecture. All right, so those are the basics that you need to know as we go into this. And that's it. Okay, so here is a labeled version of the neuron model. So again, you should be on page 129, and the neuron model has, it's called the neuron model, and in parentheses it says green or brown base. This is a green base neuron. The reason why they call it green or brown base is because the base is brown or green. Like, that's it. All right, so here you've got a bunch of labeled parts, which is great. You can take a picture of this, and all of your, I think pretty much all of the relevant parts are labeled here. Let's start from top to bottom and go over this model. So from top to bottom, we've got a dendrite, but before the dendrite, this or number 2. One more. This one. To number 2. Like this. I don't know. Tell me when to stop. This one. No. This one. Just say yes when I get to it. This one. This one. this one. This one. I don't know. That's as far as I've gotten. So, so, okay. All right. So, in this one, when we look at the dendrite, where we are is we're going to be in the soma. So remember that this is going to be the cell body. Now, here we've got soma or cell body in the third part, but it really should be number one. If you want to call it a perichiron, you can. I don't know. I would just call it a soma or cell body. But the soma will remind you that we're in a neuron. All right, guys. So this is the soma or the cell body. All of this, right? And then inside the soma, we've got the nucleolus. We've got the nucleus, which is the ball. And then in that, we have the nucleolus. So actually, I can't see the nucleolus in this picture because you actually have to take off that ball, which is removable. But as you can see from Kimberly Dutton, it's covered, right? So this is the nucleus, and the nucleolus is just inside. So you can just say nucleus with nucleolus, and that's fine. All right, so with that being said, I've got the soma, I've got the nucleus, I've got Nissl bodies. So if you guys see all this kind of blue stuff here, you may have to zoom in on your computer if you can, or take a snap and just kind of zoom in. The blue parts all in here are called Nissl bodies. Nissl bodies are rough ER of the neuron, and they make proteins. And then here, just so that you can compare, you can see that this image is nicely, a little bit, it's bigger. So you've got a nice image of those Nissl bodies in here, okay? Just the blue parts. All right, with that being said, we've got the dendrites. Now the dendrites, be careful here because the dendrites are the white parts sticking out, right? The white parts sticking out there. Those are the dendrites, okay? So that's going to be the dendrite. Now, what is on top of or close to the dendrite, those are going to be the, hold on. Now, you have to go all the way down to the bottom of this list, axon terminals. So guys, don't let this freak you out. Are you ready? I've got the soma of this neuron, which is this A and B. Together, this makes one neuron. But each of my soma in the brain, each of my neurons in the brain, at the dendrite, I have a bunch of axon terminals that are going to interact at the dendrites. So all of these little, looks like little suction cup things, these are all axon terminals. These are all axon terminals of other neurons that are coming and interacting here, synapsing. So that's an axon of a neuron, that's an axon, that's an axon. These are all axons of neurons, and they end at the dendrite of another neuron, at the postsynaptic cell, and this is called this is called the axon terminal. All right, guys, that makes sense? Can be a little bit confusing because all of these axon terminals are the end of other neurons that are going to be synapsing or interacting at the dendrite of this neuron. Okay, so axon terminals are the little tiny things here that interact at the dendrite of this neuron. Okay, so with that being said, cytoplasm. Cytoplasm is the yellow part. Remember we did this in the cell model at the beginning of the semester? You had all the organelles, and in between the organelles, that's what the cytoplasm was. Well, the same thing here. So if we're going to point at the blue part, if we're pointing at the blue part, that's a Nissl body. If we're pointing at the yellow part, right? That is going to be the cytoplasm. It's a little tricky, but that's not a good one. So the cytoplasm is just between the Nissl bodies. That's basically what you want to take away from that. Like, nope, that's not it. That's tricky, but you guys know what I'm saying. There, right between the Nissl bodies, that's going to be the cytoplasm, okay? And you do have cytoplasm in the axon because it's still part of the cell, but that's not where we're going to be pointing to. Okay, let's see. Axon hillock. You can see it's labeled here. So again, you've got the nice benefit of a label. That's this area here. It's part of the soma right before you get to the axon, right? So that's the axon hillock. And then of course we have the axon itself, and this here is the axon. So it does not have any myelin sheath in this image. So watch what happens here. There's the axon continued from here. So this is the axon, and then they've taken the axon and they've kind of made a sagittal cut. The pink part's now the axon. Then they pick it back up again here, right? So the axon is just the middle of all of this other stuff surrounding it, which we're going to talk about, okay? All right, guys. So hopefully that makes sense. Now we're going to be at the myelin sheath. But before we do that, let's do the endoneurium. Endoneurium might sound familiar because we have something called the endomysium or mysium. We've got the epimysium, the perimysium, and the endomysium. That's connective tissue surrounding the parts of the muscle, right? The neurium is going to be the connective tissue that surrounds the neuron, specifically the axon, okay? So the endoneurium is right down here, and it's got kind of all these fiber-looking things through it, and that's because it's connective tissue, okay? So there's no endoneurium here. There's only endoneurium here. There's no endoneurium here, okay, guys? Now, there is endoneurium over the myelin sheath, but obviously we need to be able to see it, so that's not visible on this model. Okay, so with that being said, let's talk about those three things that we have here after the endoneurium. We have the myelin sheath, we have the neurolemmocyte. I'm just going to go with Schwann cell because I like it better, but whichever one you like is fine. And then we have the neuro, or it's more commonly called the neurilemma. And that neurilemma is going to be the very outer part of the Schwann cell, okay? Where would the motor end plate be? So in this one, it's tricky because there is no motor end plate. You're welcome. Now, why is there no motor end plate? Because there's no muscle. Now, we're going to get to the node of Ranvier. So technically, the little part that looks like a little bit of a cleavage here, remember the cleavage for it? It looks like it's pinching in a bit. That's what the node of Ranvier is. So you guys see how it's kind of pinching in a little bit here? And it pinches in a little bit here? Those are the node of Ranvier. And yes, so technically there is no actual gap here, but that's what the node of Ranvier is. Can you guys see it now? Yeah. Yep. All right. Neurolemma outside the Schwanns. So basically yes. So the neurolemma is going to be the very outside. So this is where it gets kind of tricky, right? Why? Because the myelin sheath and the Schwann cell are the same thing. The Schwann cell is the myelin sheath of the axon in the peripheral nervous system, right? Okay. Now, in this case, since we're assuming that this is in the peripheral nervous system, right? Why? Because they don't tell you oligodendrocyte. They tell you Schwann cell. So we're assuming that this is in the peripheral nervous system because they tell you it's a Schwann cell. But like I just said, the myelin sheath is the Schwann cell. So how are we going to separate this? Well, some ways they do this is, do you guys see this here? Well, that is the mitochondria. Not the mitochondria, I take it back. That's the nucleus. Yeah. So that's the nucleus. So a good way to ask for this is when pointing at the nucleus. But you're not going to call it a nucleus because guess what? We don't ask for that. But that nucleus is the nucleus of the Schwann cell, because the whole myelin sheath is the Schwann cell. So if we point to this on the test, right, don't tell me that's a nucleus. It is, but that's not what we're looking for. You want to tell me that's the Schwann cell. Got it? And then if we point to the outside, like just the arrow here, just tell me that's the neurilemma. You guys with me? And then if we go on the inside, right? If we go on the inside a little bit deeper, like this one's labeled, then just tell me it's the myelin sheath. But to be honest with you, if you tell me it's the myelin sheath, the Schwann cell, or the myelin sheath, Schwann cell, or the neurilemma, well, except for the neurilemma. The neurilemma needs to be on the very outside, right? But if you go inside and tell me that's the Schwann cell or that's the myelin sheath, I'm fine. Does that make sense, guys? Because technically the myelin sheath and the Schwann cell are both the same thing. But for the neurilemma, I do want you to be aware that it really is just the outer part of the myelin sheath, specifically the Schwann cell. Okay? So here we would have to point directly to it. My arrows are for crap today. Still for crap. You know what I mean? We'd have to point kind of right to it, and then you would tell me Nuri lemma. Because the Nuri lemma is just the outer part, the very outer part. So if we point like this to the inside of that, you can tell me myelin sheath or Schwann cell. But likely what we would do is we would kind of like this one here. Then this is the nucleus, but just tell me it's the Schwann cell. But again, don't just say nucleus because we're not asking for that. So be careful. All right, guys? That becomes a little confusing, but don't overthink it. All right, with that being said, someone, Brisa mentioned this. The node of Ranvier, here, they don't actually give it any space, but they do kind of make a little indentation or like a pucker. So they kind of have that little bit of an indentation here. Both of these are the node of Ranvier. Okay? And then again, careful. We don't actually see any axon terminal over here where that would be. We don't see it. The axon terminals they're talking about are these that are interfacing or synapsing with that dendrite, with those dendrites. Those are the axon terminals we're talking about. Okay. And then the question was, of course, ta-da, the motor end plate. But riddle me this. Does anybody see a muscle cell here? No. So how in the hell can we have a motor end plate? Or no muscle cell. Not only is there no muscle cell, technically with this neuron, which we're looking at, right, there's no axon terminals. The axon terminal would be on this side, and there is none. So we don't have an axon terminal, and we don't have a muscle cell, so we don't have a motor end plate. I don't know what they're talking about, but it isn't here. I don't know. This is the way it goes. All right. However, we will see it on the magnetic model just for kicks. All right, with that being said, you have the list on page 129. Where are the dendrites? Don't confuse them with the axon terminals. Yes, just the beige part sticking out of the soma. Exactly, good. Now, where is the soma? I like the soma, but you can call it cell body. Or hey, if you like carry-on, go for it. Yeah, the whole thing is going to be the soma. Okay, awesome. Now, we do ask for the nucleus here, not of the Schwann cell, but we do ask for the nucleus. Yeah, the whole ball there is the nucleus. Now, because the ball has to be removed to see the nucleolus, you can't actually see it. So you can just say nucleus with nucleolus. Now, here I will ask, because it's relevant, where are the axon terminals? Or if you like synaptic end bulbs, that's fine too. That's it. Those weird beige, is that a beige? I don't know, caramel color? Those are the axon terminals. Okay, good. Where are the Nissl bodies? Pumpkin pie, go for it. Yeah, maybe they are kind of a weird orange color. I don't know what that, rust? I don't know, whatever it is. So the Nissl bodies are all the blue. Exactly, good job. Now, remember, the cytoplasm is just the space between the Nissl bodies because that's the only thing. Chasing the egg. It looks like sperm. Oh, yeah, it does. Don't put that. All right, awesome. So remember, the space between the Nissl bodies is going to be considered the cytoplasm. Axon hillock. There's only one space for it. Yeah. Now, technically, the model is showing those microtubules, but that's fine. That area is the axon hillock. The axon. Now, this one. Yeah, that's the axon, right? Now, technically, so that you guys know, the axon's here, and then this is the sagittal cut of the axon. Exactly. Okay, just so that you know. All right. Where is the endoneurium? There's only one space that you can see. Exactly. That's the endoneurium, right? And as you can see, in this area, that's where, based on this, okay, so basically the soma should go here, and then here you should have the axon terminals, because there's not just one-to-one. There's a couple of them, right? So these are the axon terminals. And then you should have the muscle cell here. And then that would be the motor end plate. But guess what? There's no axon terminals on this bad boy, and there is no muscle cell fiber on this. So not happening. All right. All right, cool. What else are we doing? Okay, let's do Nuri lemma. Remember, Nuri lemma, I want the very outer part of that myelin sheath or Schwann cell. Yeah, so it's got to be the very outer part, right? And you don't want to do the axon because the axon doesn't have that. Good. Because the Nuri lemma technically is just the outer part, right? All right, now, myelin sheath. Myelin sheath. Usually, honestly, we're going to go a little deeper. Yeah, exactly. The people with, Now, not the axon, but yeah, exactly. The purple is good. The red line is good. The fingers are good. Now, we could do that also for the Schwann cell, but I feel like we're going to go, we're going to go here or here, right? Hey, the yellow. Yeah, exactly, the yellow. So again, if you see a line pointing to that nucleus in that Schwann cell, don't call it a nucleus. We only have one nucleus we want. That's here in the soma of the neuron, the multipolar neuron. Here, if we point to the nucleus here, that's going to be what we want, Schwann cell. Okay, awesome. But again, honestly, myelin sheath and Schwann cell are interchangeably, but not that Nuri lemma, guys. I want it at the outer part. I don't know what I'm doing. Not that. There. Exactly. Just because technically the Nuri lemma is not the whole thing. All right. So that's not that bad, right? Not that bad. Again, knock it out. It's quite straightforward. Just boom, boom, boom. Get it done. Especially the easy ones, right? They're just like, oh, man, just get it done. Review it every couple days. Whatever. All right. Now, so magnetic neuron model, I probably should have asked somebody. I had this from before because, again, it's on here. I got this from the publisher. I just feel uncomfortable not having you know it because it's here. But if this model is not on Blackboard, I don't know what, we're just not going to do it. So let's just quickly go over this. I'm not going to really test you. I just want you to know what it is, okay? And it literally is a magnetic model where this is just an image. It's just like a drawing. And then these parts here come out. They come out, and you can actually see what's underneath it. So it's an interesting model in one way, and in another way, it sucks hardcore. So, All right, so with this being said, what have I done? I basically blown up and snipped parts of it, okay? So a couple things here is this part is the soma of this magnetic part of the model, right? The problem is you can't see anything on the inside unless you take it off, which you can in the lab. So what you can't see in here is you can't see the Nissl bodies, you can't see the nucleus, and obviously not the nucleolus. So all of that is a moot point here because you can't see it, right? But that's still the cell body here. Here's still the cell body here. The dendrites come off. The dendrites you can see are the clear part here. They're the clear. And then the axon terminals, again, same as the other model, are these little, this is straight up orange. Those are the axon terminals, okay? And again, you can see them in this illustration here. Okay, so far, so okay. However, this model becomes very challenging because it has a separation between the CNS and the PNS. Right here is where I separated this image. And it's hard to see, but there's a little tiny marking here, and it says CNS, which means this is the oligodendrocyte. Okay, that's why if you look on the magnetic neuron model and you go down, it has the Schwann cell, but it also has it also has the oligodendrocyte, because in this model, unlike the other model, so don't get confused, the only thing we see in the other model is a Schwann cell, which means that cell is going to be the axon in that cell is going to be part of the peripheral nervous system. Here, it actually does say central nervous system. And so this myelin sheath is actually called oligodendrocyte. Not the other one, just this one, because it's CNS. Yeah. And then again, you can't see the mitochondria because it's closed, right? The mitochondria, these beans looking things. But the top of this thing which comes off is closed, so everything inside you can't see. And so you can't see the Golgi apparatus either. You can't see the nucleus, can't see the nucleolus. You can't see the cytoplasm. But you can see the axon hillock because it's just right here. Right, it'd be right there in that area. You can see the node of Ranvier, not here. Hopefully you can see the next image because it kind of sucks in all these images. Okay, so that being said, that's it. The myelin sheath is still this. It's still in here because it's the CNS. It's going to be called the oligodendrocyte. That's it. Now, the next image is the second part of this, where you can't see it, but it says PNS. Okay, now this would be the node of Ranvier here. Okay, that would be a node of Ranvier there. And again, I don't think you'll see it, but I just want to go over it just because it make me feel more comfortable. Again, PNS from here down, it looks exactly like the other model we talked about. Here, we're talking about the Schwann cell. This is the myelin sheath. The outer part is the neurilemma. Remember, there's no neurilemma on the oligodendrocyte because sadly in the central nervous system, there is no repairing an axon damaged for whatever reason, right? That's why you see people who have gotten into motorcycle accidents, swimming accidents, other accidents, and they've damaged their spinal cord. When you damage the spinal cord, that's still considered the central nervous system, and you can't, that's still the axons there are oligodendrocytes. So you're not going to be able to repair that. But when we get into the peripheral nervous system outside the spinal cord, if you damage an axon, you can still get some sort of recovery or repair to a certain degree because that Schwann cell has a neurilemma, which is what we have here because it's in the PNS. And that's basically it, right? So maybe the way to look at this one, oh, hold on a second. Oh, you know what? I just thought of something. I bet you they're going to point to that for the neurilemma. Yeah. Now that I think about it, I bet you they're going to point to that for the neurilemma, myelin sheath in the middle, a little bit closer down, and then somewhere like that, the nucleus of the Schwann cell for the Schwann cell. Does that make sense, guys? I think they'll do it like that. Because this, you can see the actual outside. That's the very outside. So technically, that would make sense to make that the neurilemma. But you see what I'm saying. Just as long as you've got an outer part as the neurilemma, the Schwann cell is the yellow part, right, the inside. And then you can still call it the Schwann or the myelin sheath. But if we point to this nucleus here, that's the nucleus of the Schwann cell. It's not the nucleus of the axon, right? We don't have any nucleus in the axon. We have mitochondria in the axon. I think we do. I want to say we do. It doesn't matter. We're not going to ask for it. All right. With that being said, back to this PNS, which is going to be this part here, which makes this the neurilemma. This part is the nucleus of the Schwann cell, so it's the Schwann cell. This is the myelin sheath. Now, remember the big question of where's my motor unit? Well, guess what you see here, folks? What is this part here? What does that look like to you? It's the muscle cell, exactly. So we have the axon terminal of this neuron. So you see how soma, axon terminal, right? So we do have an axon terminal here, which is great. And then we have an actual, so this is actually the sarcoplasmic, there's sarcoplasmic reticulum in here. But this is actually the sarcomere. So here you can see the motor end plate here. Basically the area of communication at the axon terminal of the motor neuron, and then here on the actual cell. That's the motor end plate. So we can ask for it here, but I don't know that we're going to have this image on the exam. I just didn't want to leave it in case, I don't know, in case maybe I didn't see it or something. Okay? All right, awesome. And that's it. All right, so technically this is an axon terminal here, but the area that you saw also has the axon terminals, the little orange ones, because these are other neurons that synapse at this soma. Okay, so that's it. All right, so that was your neuron model and then your magnetic model in the event that you see that. Okay, and wouldn't they ask for it on the model that shows the axon terminal? Do you mean the motor end plate? Yeah, they couldn't, okay, so they technically, according to this, I'm not sure why they do that, but so this is the neuron model with the green base, right? But there's no motor end plate because first of all, there's no axon terminal of this neuron and there's no muscle cell. Yeah. But again, you can see it here. because there is an axon terminal of this motor neuron, and it does, you can see how it synapses with the muscle fiber. So again, I just didn't feel comfortable not showing you this, but I don't know, I didn't see it on Blackboard. So if it's not there, I'm assuming they're not going to ask about it. But again, there you go. Okay, awesome. So let's wrap it up, folks. All right, so this doesn't matter. This also doesn't matter for this. Okay, so remember, Kimberly Dutton, Kimberly Dutton are the images from Blackboard. The other images, they were labeled, so y'all know how I love my pre-labeled stuff, so I don't have to do it all. But it's the same, as you can see, it's a different photograph, but the same model. Okay, so where are we now? We are in still page 129. We're in the nervous system. Okay, so a plexus is going to be a grouping of nerves, just a branching of nerves, right? So they're grouped together. As you can see on the left here, we've got the brachial plexus and the cervical plexus. Now, the nice thing is, you know where the cervical vertebrae are. So the cervical plexus literally come out of that intervertebral foramen that you see that forms when vertebrae stack up on top of each other, right? And if you look at the stacking of the vertebra laterally, you can see the holes on the side, and those are called intervertebral, between vertebra, foramen, right? Holes. And that's where all of these plexus come out of. That's where the spinal nerves come out of. Now, we still have the spinal, what do we have? This is just the nervous system, right? So we're going to go into a little bit more detail later. But obviously, the cervical plexus are nerves, a bunch of nerves that come off the cervical vertebra. And that's exactly what they are, right? So you're up here. They don't go all the way. I think it's just about to C4. I want to say C4 or C3, but it doesn't matter. We're not expecting you to count the number of vertebrae. You can just clearly see that's cervical. Boom, right? And then the brachial plexus, well, the brachial has to do with the arm, right? So we've got the brachium, the antebrachium, right? And so here, the brachial plexus is going to come off of the last couple cervical vertebra and then the first few thoracic vertebra, ultimately just inferior to the cervical, right? Which you can see here, right? So just be careful, because I don't want you, it can kind of get, if we put an arrow here, if we put an arrow here, I don't want you to call that the cervical, right? So just be careful. We're up higher in the cervical, and we're low cervical, high thoracic for the brachial. Yes, Gloria, go ahead.
So they wouldn't use a bracket like that? Like, that would be so much more clear versus just an arrow.
I'm almost positive they would use a bracket. It's just, I'm just thinking, would they use it? They should use it, but if they don't use a big bracket, for an example, right? I just don't want you to think that, just don't get confused, right? Cervical is going to be higher, brachial is going to be a little bit lower, okay? But what's very interesting about the brachial is, although it comes out of the lower cervical, higher thoracic, we don't go into past T4. So that kind of becomes an interesting area. And what you'll notice, we have a cervical, brachial, lumbar plexus, sacral plexus, but we don't have a thoracic plexus. What we have is intercostal nerves. So it's actually quite interesting if you kind of step back and just think about it for a little bit. So again, cervical plexus is going to be at the cervical vertebra. Brachial plexus is going to be at the lower cervical, upper thoracic vertebra. And it's going to branch out into the nerves of the axillary nerves, the brachial nerves, median nerve, ulnar nerve, and the radial nerve, and other nerves that we don't have to worry about right now. Okay, so with this image, of course, here, we're going to go and look at the rib cage and basically the thoracic cavity. And at the ribs, each rib it's basically a parallel running nerve, and those nerves are called the intercostal nerves, right? And you can see that in this diagram very clearly. Okay, and that's it. So it's really straightforward. So with that being said, again, these are same. They're very similar models. Obviously, you can tell they're not exactly the same. So what is this area here? What's that going to be, guys? You can look at your list and write it out. Cervical plexus, exactly, right? Now, this area here then is going to be the, what's area that I just did there? Brachial plexus, exactly. And then you can see here we've got the axillary. We're going to get the brachial about here, right? And we can't see anything further than that. But guess what? They don't ask, well, they do ask for the axillary nerve. Now, remember that the axillary nerve, and I'll show you another image in just a second. This is the axillary area, right at the armpit, right? What's this? That's the scapula. What's this? That's the head of the humerus. So it's this area here. We only have one nerve you need to know in that armpit area, and it's going to be the axillary nerve, right? So that's where we're going to be. And that's the only nerve you have to know up here. And here is the image. Now, this is not a good image. I'm not sure why I chose this one, to be honest, because you can only really see this on the left. And you can only really see in this image the median and the ulnar. But the big thing you want to do is, and this is honestly, guys, there's only 3 nerves. It's super easy. Thumb, pinky, and then, of course, the middle is median. So thumb is going to be your radial. Pinky is going to be the ulnar, right? So that's how you do it. So shockingly, that's the radial nerve by the thumb. That's the ulnar nerve, well, this one, by the pinky, and then between them is the median nerve. So on this one, you can see the ulnar nerve and you can see the median, but obviously you can't see the radial here. And we wouldn't use this because you can see that it's just kind of showing you how the bones are going to interact here. All right. So where is the median nerve? Again, you can't actually see the ulnar nerve here. I lie. You can't see the radial nerve. That's the median. Exactly. Looks like bacon. Yeah, it does, actually. It does. Yep. Now, where is the ulnar nerve? That's it. Remember, pinky, ulna, that's where the ulna is by the pinky side, ulnar. Radius, the thumb, that's where the radius is, radial. Now, don't call this the radius nerve, guys, right? That's not what it's called. You'll lose points. No, it's okay. Don't worry about it. Remember, this is the radial nerve, ulnar nerve. Median is not an L-I-N. I know, now you're making me hungry. I was fine, people. I was fine. Now I'm hungry. All right, awesome. So, all right, perfect. Here's your pretty image on the right. Where is the radial nerve? Here you can see it. That's it, right? Radial nerve. Good. Where is the ulnar nerve? Exactly. So radial ulnar, right? AR. So don't call it the ulna nerve. Don't call it the radius nerve. Just be careful. And then the median. Where's the median? Again, super easy, guys. Just watch that spelling because that's easy to kind of get mixed up. Now, so we've got a lot of really cool nerves here that you don't need. We only need 2 of this group, so don't get confused with that. But let's finish up the plexus. So we had a cervical plexus by the cervical, right? Top couple vertebra of the cervical vertebra. That's the cervical plexus. And then we have the brachial plexus. Now we're going to go down under the thoracic cavity, right? Remember, there is no thoracic plexus, but there are what? What are these ones here? All of these parallel yellow lines. What are they? Remember, I don't have a thoracic plexus, but I got a bunch of intercostal nerves. Perfect. That's it. Okay. Now, it's kind of cool, right? Because if you look at this, these intercostal nerves are obviously really critical to the muscles in this area because it's going to support breathing. But I don't have appendages off the thoracic cavity. I have an appendage, arms, off this by the thoracic, by the top thoracic, the upper thoracic, right? Region of the vertebra. So the brachial plexus is going to go out and innervate the arms. And then we're going to come down just inferior to the thoracic cavity. And then we're going to get to the lumbar plexus at the lumbar vertebra. And then we're going to get to the sacral plexus at the sacrum, right? So again, oh wow, my bones, right? And what you see here on the left is you can clearly see that I've got the right below my thoracic cavity, the ribs, right? I've got the lumbar plexus. Now, this image is better because you see the coccyx here, right? But you really want to be careful and not go too high up for the sacrum or the sacral plexus. So this area just underneath that thoracic area is going to be the lumbar plexus. Just inferior to it is going to be the sacral plexus. Okay, now, why does that matter? Well, because you have to know that. If you can look here, there's a lumbar plexus and sacral plexus. But also, it is very helpful to know. What? What's funny? What? Something's funny, but I missed it.
You said it's helpful to know because you have to know it.
Oh, you know what? I actually didn't mean to say that. It's stupid, but it's true. Okay. The reason why that came out that way is because I kind of forgot for a minute that you had to know it, but then I remembered that you did have to know it. So, but that, you guys are like, wait, what time is it? Oh, it's 8:14. That makes sense. Oh, so on face value, it's stupid but makes sense and completely something that I would say. So it all totally makes sense. Now, what I was going to say, which hopefully it makes more sense, is that as per the sheet, if you look under lumbar plexus, you'll see the femoral nerve. And if you look under sacral plexus, you'll see an indentation and you'll see the sciatic nerve, right? Just like under the brachial plexus, we've got a bunch of nerves because those nerves branch off of these plexuses or plexus. So, but it's really helpful because when you get to the leg, it's a 2D image, even though it's a model. It's still flat, right? So it gets a little bit weird. So by knowing that I'm in the lumbar and knowing that the femoral nerve comes off the lumbar, you can know that that nerve here is the femoral nerve. There is an easier way to know that. It's on top of the femur, right? That's the femur, right? You can see it. Looks like bacon at the leg. And the femoral nerve is on top of it. But it gets a little janky with the sciatic nerve. I know. Now, the sciatic nerve, as is implied in this list, it comes off of the sacral. So the fat part here is the sacrum. Now, that's actually fine because it looks like it's coming from the back here. So on the left part of the left leg, that looks like the sacrum, the sciatic nerve, because it's coming off of the back, right? But what happens here is that this comes in the front from the lumbar plexus, the femoral nerve. The sacral nerve comes in the back from the sciatic nerve comes from the back of the sacral plexus, and that's fine. But then you get over here and it's all super janky, right? So you got to be careful because really the only thing coming on the right side is what, guys? The sciatic nerve. You see what I'm saying? That right side has always been janky. And until I was like, oh, damn, the sciatic nerve comes off of the sacral plexus, it was janky. The left side is very clear visually that that's the femoral nerve. And I can follow it up. It's very clear that that's the sciatic nerve, and I can follow it up. But watch out. Sciatic. You guys see what I just did there? Yeah, there's really no femoral nerve that you can see very clearly. Now, this is a deep femoral nerve. Technically, it's called the circumflex femoral nerve, but really, this is where they ask for the femoral. Do you guys see what I just did there? Femoral nerve comes from the lumbar plexus. Sciatic nerve, I keep calling it the sacral nerve, and it's sciatic nerve comes from the sacral plexus. Here's the sacral plexus. That's the sciatic nerve. And it is the fat nerve. That's true. I don't know that it's always super obvious when we get down here, right? But it is the fat nerve if you can follow it down. So that's what we want to go with that. All right. And then that's it for the nervous system. So let me quickly. Oh, okay, guys. Let me do this for you. Ready? Brachial plexus. It has to be. Intercostal nerves. Has to be. Lumbar plexus. Intercostal. Lumbar. Careful here. These lumbar are really big. Lumbar. Sacral. You can see that coccyx right there. And technically, sciatic nerve, fat nerve. See right in the back. Sciatic nerve, fat nerve, right? That's coming off here. Now this nerve here, that's going to be that's the femoral. Is that an animal? I know. It looks like a buffalo or something, like a huge piece of meat. I know. I thought that too. I was like, damn, that's a carcass. No, apparently it's supposed to be a human being. All right. So, guys, again, plexus. I really cannot see. This is the brachial plexus. I really cannot see the cervical plexus, but they might get janky on you. It's bigger. So all of this is the lumbar plexus, which means that's the femoral nerve. You guys with me? And then that's the sacral. The sacral plexus, that's the sciatic nerve. That goes behind the bone, that goes in front of the bone. Comes up, lumbar plexus. All right? So I don't know, that's janky. But here they're going to ask for the intercostal nerves, brachial plexus. They could ask for the lumbar plexus here, possible. Okay? But it gets tricky here because you're not going to go low enough for the entire lumbar. And that really is the entire lumbar. And obviously on the side is the plexus. All right. So I didn't finish all the slides, but they're super easy. So I'll knock it out next class. I think I'll remember. All right, guys. Any questions about that? You can actually. This is a good image actually of the sciatic nerve. That's pretty cool. This is the sacral plexus here. All right. 8:20. Boom. Knocked it out. A Thai animal. Oh. It's like, what is Thai animal? Pork ribs. Yeah. Ugh. Oh, yeah. It does. This looks like a carcass. It straight up does not look like a human, torso. Yeah. Good. We start. Yeah. And so to finish up this exercise 17, all we have to do is just a couple slides. So we do have some slides. Yeah. You're welcome. You're like, I'm definitely not having ribs for dinner. Unless you're like Hannibal Lecter. At the bottom. Yeah. You mean this one? No. Keep going. Bye, guys. I'm done. You guys can go. No problem. Yeah, I'm with you. Just go eat ribs, just not human ribs, because you're gross.
Yes. Can you keep going back? Right
here
there.
Or more?
Right there. Okay. Keep going.
Okay. Tell me when to stop, okay?
Okay. Right. Okay. I'm grabbing it. Oh, go back.
Okay. It's okay. No. Tell me when to stop. Now, remember, all the Kimberly Dutton images are on Blackboard. So don't feel pressure to get that. Just go to Blackboard. And then whatever's labeled here, you can just, take a snap. So are you good here or no? Do you want me to keep going?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I'm good with that one. Uh-huh.
Okay. And what about this one?
I need the cranial. I think I have that one. Perfect.
Okay. And I think
I need the one that's in the one that sits lower in
Okay. Got you.
I don't know how to say it.
No, don't worry about it.
That one.
You want to keep going down with the...
It's the one that looks like the ribs, but it looks like a buffalo, but it's labeled. You have one that was labeled like this one.
Okay, hold on. Let me see. So I don't think I had this one that was labeled, but what I do have labeled is this one. So I don't have the actual carcass looking one, but you can use that. You can use this one, which has the lumbar plexus, sacral plexus, and then you don't worry about all these the weird ones. You just need the femoral nerve and the sciatic nerve. It's just that was all labeled. Give me a second, Tanya.
Perfect.
All right, does that work? Yeah,
yes,
no
ma'am.
problem. All right, Tanya, what can I do for you? Welcome. Bacon. Nice, Jennifer. Sorry.
Yes, ma'am. I had a quick question. If I could ask you like offline, if I could wait around.
Okay, sure. Let me just make sure everyone's gone. It's 8:22. I know it's far back, but I said I'll ask it. Yeah, no problem. What is the name of the muscle under the armpit? The muscle.